All right, welcome into another episode of AL.com Recruiting. I'm your host, Simone Eli, sports anchor reporter over at Channel 5 in Mobile, alongside Ben Thomas, who covers high school sports for AL.com. We're super excited for our live guest today. First time we're going to do this on the show, and who better to have than John Garcia, the director of football recruiting for Sports Illustrated, always in the know, probably has a better idea of recruiting throughout the entire country than most people that you would ever meet. And John, thank you so much for joining us, man. I love the setup behind you there.
Yeah, thanks. This is, over the last year, this is 8 hours a day or more sometimes right here. So gotta distract break up the conversation a little bit.
Definitely. I mean, I know how popular you are, how in demand you are, especially right now during the off season. Recruiting is the hot topic. Official visits opening up. We'll get to all of that. But we want to start things off talking Alabama football. I know that's, the main topic of conversation here in the state of Alabama. Of course, the dominant presence that Nick Saban has been when it comes to recruiting. What can you say just about this last class? Looking back, yet again, the number one class in the nation for the Tide, and it seems like the drop-off, man, is just not happening.
Yeah, every time we think there's going to be a potential slip or even a little dip, right, to 3 or 4, it just doesn't happen. And I think that's really about Nick Saban, the continuity that he's built with the program, despite just about every type of turnover you can have, whether it's coordinators, other assistant coaches. Transfer portal even has bitten Alabama at different times, but the Tide just kind of rolls on regardless of all of these extenuating circumstances. Even a pandemic didn't slow down Alabama from recruiting from a very national standpoint. And I thought that was really key for this class of 2021. Everybody goes to the state of Texas to recruit, but it's hard to pull prospects out of there, especially with, the resurgence of Texas with Steve Sarkisian, and certainly the sustained success of Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M, and even Oklahoma, which has always used Texas as a pipeline. But, lo and behold, even without visits and a pandemic, Nick Saban brings 7 Texans in, including some of the best in the state, whether it's the Brockermeyer brothers on the offensive line or several others. So it's just sort of rinse and repeat with Alabama, but it all goes back to Nick Saban and that continuity at the very top. Prospects give Alabama the benefit of the doubt, even during times where they can't see campus or can't visit any school. And I think that's the biggest indication of how long this dynasty has been rolling, and really another indication that it might not slow down, as soon as many may think.
Yeah, John, I think it's super impressive how much Nick Saban has been able to adjust as late as he is in life, able to adjust to the world nowadays, the social media world, of being able to recruit these guys and doing what it takes, even in a pandemic, to get guys into the program. And Ben, I know you and I have been talking about some of these upcoming, especially local guys here in Alabama who are going to stay in state and play in Tuscaloosa, Ben.
Yeah, John, what do you think about? I'm interested to see your thoughts on this class of 2022 that we got coming up. Obviously, Jeremiah Alexander is at the top of it, but how good is this class in the state rank compared to others in your time of covering?
Ben, I think it's rock solid. I think it's a little, defensive dominant, which we'll see in 2022 and 2023, especially when we get there. And we're kind of there now, but I think there's nice balance, but a little defense heavy. You mentioned Jeremiah Alexander, probably a consensus number 1 prospect in the state. We're not quite there yet at SI, but he's been on radar for several years at Thompson High School. And why not? He's a second level guy who can play inside linebacker or rush the passer. And really at that linebacker position, it's about affecting third downs. And he does it as well as just about anybody in the state of Alabama. But I think you get some offensive blips on the radar at the very top. I'm sure we'll talk about Emmanuel Henderson, the running back who's committed to Alabama. He's about as good as it gets at that position in the state. And I think he brings something different to the table. I think in Alabama, we're used to sort of bigger power backs or even our smaller prospects in the state seemingly play with more oomph and force. But Henderson's a blazer. He's a guy who can pick him up and put him down, and he's comfortable in space and in the passing game. But he's not a small running back by any stretch of the imagination. 6 foot 6'1", right in that 185, 190 pound range on offense there for Geneva County. And I think what makes him special is where he could be. The floor is great. He's got the instincts, the vision, the top end speed that you want, but you see his frame and once he gets to a program like Alabama, he's going to put on weight and then maybe resonate as more of a complete back inside the tackles, as well as what he does so well right now, playing in space. So he's an exciting prospect to watch and probably the headliner for Alabama from an offensive standpoint.
Yeah, we've talked to Manuel on the show before and had his coach on there, and certainly a great prospect. What about, you mentioned Jeremiah Alexander? We had him on the show a couple of weeks ago. Once committed to Alabama, decommitted. Now he's down to 6 and setting up visits. Do we still expect him to go to Alabama, or do you think it's a 2-team race? Where do you see that finishing?
That's going to be a fun one. I think Alabama's always in the conversation. The day he decommitted, everybody flooded his inbox, including me. And I'm like, hey, is this a moving on from Alabama thing, or is this more of a let me just take a step back overall? And he said the latter. He said Alabama's absolutely right at the top and kind of still his number one school at that point. Since then, many other programs have gotten involved, and he's going to take some visits. UCF is actually going to get him on campus. Shout out to Gus Malzahn and that staff that obviously, have known him and tracked him for quite some time. So UCF's going to be kind of the dark horse school in this conversation, but several other programs are going to be involved here as well. I think LSU has always kind of held him in high regard, and I think he reciprocates that interest. So I do think if he leaves the state, I could see LSU getting involved. And you wonder about Auburn. Will they and that new staff start to push to keep him in state? I think the more programs get involved, the more time a very calculated kid like Jeremiah takes in making this decision. And that's not very common in this class. I think we're going to see a lot of summer commitments just because of overall numbers and roster attrition on these college football rosters. But I think Jeremiah is a kid who's calculated and obviously talented. So he may be one of the few who's able to take his time.
John, go ahead, Ben. Go, Ben.
Oh, I was just going to say the Jeremiah told us that Trey Williams was a big factor in his recruiting or getting a visit to UCF. But what about, speaking of Thompson and Jeremiah Alexander, Conner Harrell, their quarterback, seems to be really getting the offers. I know he got put out in North Carolina and Michigan lately. What do you see in him? He looks like he's over the collarbone injury and ready for a big senior year.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were waiting to see how he healed from that injury, which we all saw as he led Thompson to that crazy state championship game and obviously win over Auburn. But really, one of the better high school seasons we've ever seen from the quarterback position in this state. And that says a lot in and of itself. And the offer list has really just ballooned this year in particular. Michigan and North Carolina, as you said, jumping in this weekend. And I think they'll crash the party for the race for his commitment. He's got a top 10 out there, but I think now that those offers are in, they will find their way into the top 10. Both Mac Brown and Jim Harbaugh are trying to get him on campus in June for visits. They're not set yet, but I do tend to think they will get set very soon. So I think they'll play a major part in this recruitment, and he's already got trips lined up to Northwestern and Duke, I believe. So this is going to be a true national recruitment for a Birmingham area prospect. And it makes sense because both Alabama and Auburn already have their quarterbacks verbally committed in this class. But I think that's going to be how we track this thing going forward. Because to me, he's the number one quarterback in the state of Alabama. So how do we look back 3-4 years from now and measure that against Holden Gariner headed to Auburn and Ty Simpson headed to Alabama versus what Harrell produces at the next level? Seemingly wherever he goes, he may have a better situation in terms of playing early at one of these places. And why not? He's a modern era quarterback who can make all the throws in the pocket or on the move. Ridiculous decision maker, unbelievable touchdown interception ratio. I think it was like 46-3 or something close to that. So winning program at the highest level. I mean, there's a lot of boxes checked for Harrell. And now that he's healthy, it's no surprise to see those offers continue to come in.
John, I want to switch gears just a little bit over to the other side of the state in Auburn. I know that Conner has an Auburn offer, at least from what I saw online. How do you feel about Bryan Harsin, his ability to come into the SEC from Boise State and make an impact on recruiting? Obviously, he's put some people around him in Derek Mason, Mike Bobo, guys who understand what it takes to recruit in the SEC, not to take anything away from Harsin himself, but how much do you think that's going to benefit him in this conference?
I think it's going to be huge for him to put those coaches around him, but I think his own reputation will resonate with prospects. And now, starting in June, he'll be able, Simone, to sell it in person. I think sometimes we get so excited about these, adult-looking prospects who play at an adult level, and we forget that they're 16, 17 years old making huge decisions. Now they're going to be able to see campuses for the first time for most of them in their lives, at least in this red carpet treatment style that is the game of recruiting. So I think that in-person pitch will obviously be critical for Harsin, but I think he carries some benefit of the doubt as well in his own right. He's known as a quarterback guy, an offensive guy, played the position, has obviously had a lot of success coaching it, and offense in general. So I think that will help at that position. So it's why it's no surprise to see Auburn with one of their first commitments being at the quarterback position. But as you mentioned, Harrell has that offer, and Auburn is pretty public about looking for more than one quarterback in this class and building the competition in that quarterback room in general. We just saw them bring in TJ Finley from LSU to compete with Bo Nix and others. So I think there's going to be a competitive atmosphere at that position. And I think if you do that, it bodes very well for the rest of the team. So I think Harsin's going to build where his strength is now. And then when he gets in front of prospects, he can sort of branch out and build what is sure to be a good class, because as we know, Alabama recruits very national always. So Auburn always has an opportunity to do well in the state and in the region. And that's where Auburn has recruited well of late, right? So Alabama, Georgia, and the state of Florida has always been the pipeline. Now Harsin can build on that and go more West Coast and more national to compete with Alabama and the rest of the SEC.
How big is it for them, Auburn especially, John, to open up these visits again? It just seems like they've always been able to sell the family, the atmosphere, the town, and maybe more so than most schools, they've been hurt by, the pandemic and being able to shut it down. How big is it for them to start in June and to be able to kind of catch up, for lack of a better phrase, with some of these other prospects?
Yeah, that's a great phrase, man. Catching up for every first-year coaching staff is really important. It's just something tangible. It's something that hasn't been able to be sold to prospects and their coaches and their families. Sometimes, most importantly, the families. And you get on campus at Auburn, like you said, that is the sell, and I expect that to continue to be the sell moving forward as the fun college town and more sort of local and niche atmosphere compared to the broad atmosphere across the state in Tuscaloosa, the national atmosphere in Tuscaloosa. So I think that will still be a strong selling point. And I think, younger coaching staffs like this one have an opportunity to push further with in-person visits this year, because now name, image, and likeness is going to factor into the conversation. So you used to go on these visits and you get the jersey presentation, the academic presentation, you see all the facilities, and then now we're going to have an NIL presentation on how you can market yourself and your brand if you come to school X. So in Brian's case, if you come to Auburn, this is how we're going to help you build your own brand. And I think just naturally with technology and social media, things like that, the younger staffs are going to have a little bit more of an advantage in pushing and selling that to prospects. So I expect that to be an extra layer of that first impression at Auburn. And again, with the diverse staff that they have in place, I expect it to go really well.
Ben, I know that we've talked about quite a few in-state guys and what that recruiting list looks like. Patrick, behind the scenes for us right now, always does a great job. Patrick, if we can we pull up that list of those top in-state recruit guys? I want to take a look at that. Ask John a couple of questions about some of these guys that we have seen, even some in-state quarterback guys that we've had an opportunity to talk to. Ben, when you look at that list, who intrigues you the most? I know John has an idea about all these guys, but who intrigues you the most when it comes to these uncommitted players and what their future could look like? Outside of course, Jeremiah Alexander, who, we're all kind of waiting to see if Alabama is the way he goes.
Yeah, well, obviously, being based in Mobile, Shamar James is intriguing to me, the Faith Academy star. He said he's narrowed his list to Alabama and Florida, and we'll see where he goes there. Most people think he'll be headed to Alabama, but, what position he'll play in college is kind of up in the air too. A lot of people think he'll be a linebacker. Some people even think a safety, but I've seen him on occasion. A great player, obviously. John, when you look at this list, and of course you'll have your own list, I know, coming out at SI later this summer, but what prospects intrigue you? I mean, other than Jeremiah and Emmanuel Henderson that we started out at, what pops out at you on this list?
Yeah, Ben, I see a lot of versatility on this list. You mentioned James. He's sort of a hybrid linebacker safety, one of these guys that in 3 different downs can play 3 different positions. And I see a lot of that with Traquan Fagans in the secondary, even Curtis Perry, who's a pure pass rusher. But as he builds out his frame, he can maybe rush the passer from the inside. That's another guy the Florida Gators are really high on. Justin Finley, another inside-out pass rusher. TJ Dudley has some of that as well, coming out of Montgomery Catholic. You know, he's one who has pass rusher traits, but is more experienced as a traditional linebacker, sort of the opposite of a Jeremiah Alexander. But he's got the height, weight, length, speed foundation going for him as well, as a very long prospect who can play forward or backward, which is extremely coveted, and that's why he's got a national offer list as well. So I just see a lot of defense-heavy prospects like we talked about earlier, but also versatile prospects who play defense, which is really what every single college defensive coordinator wants.
Do you see there's been a lot of talk? We saw Riley Quick on that list, the younger brother of Pierce Quick, who's at Alabama, and Riley's also a good pitcher for Hewitt Trustful. What do you see in his future? Do you see a lot of people are now thinking maybe he's going to be a baseball guy? What do you hear on him?
Yeah, you know, his father, Wayne, you know, has been talking about baseball with him since we covered Pierce several years ago at Hewitt Trustful, and that has sort of come true. But what we maybe didn't expect was his growth spurts and the football offers coming in as really another two-way lineman, you know, an offensive tackle or a pass rusher there in Trustful. But look, when it's a two-sport situation, you always lean to the sport with the longevity. And oftentimes, you know, this audience won't love to hear it. You know, oftentimes football is not that sport, especially when baseball is involved. You know, we saw it, you know, several years ago in this state with other prospects. And I think you're going to see it here with Riley Quick. It doesn't mean he won't try to play both and pull a Jameis Winston at the next level. But as we know, that's very hard to accomplish somewhere in the SEC or at a major Division I college program. So I could see baseball being where he ends up permanently, because I know earlier in his life that was sort of the first love, and that's hard to overcome as well. But, you know, hey, you know, if Nick Saban really sits him down and says, look, we really need you to come and bolster this offensive line, it's hard for anyone to say no to that. So that'll be one of the more intriguing sport and recruiting decisions in the state, no doubt.
John, you touched on this a minute ago, but TJ Finley, what type of impact could he have there at Auburn? Bo Nix has been the guy for a couple of years now, has had some moments where we've been super impressed, some moments where we've been wondering what the heck's going on the field, and then most recently some off-the-field situations, you know, on the sideline, getting into it with some guys. We know that he's a competitive guy, so definitely not trying to criticize him, but could Finley come in and truly make an impact? Would Harsin potentially look at a two-quarterback system? What's your take on that?
You know, Harsin's been a roll the dice kind of coach at that position. And I think that's where a guy like TJ Finley, who's transferring, can see the upside in coming to a school like Auburn. You know, he started a true freshman before, or a first-year player before. He just did it at Boise State 2 years ago. So I think, you know, there's upside, you know, optically about coming to Auburn. And like we said earlier, Harsin wants to build a competitive quarterback room. And I think TJ knows he's very different physically compared to Bo Nix. Bo is more of an RPO, play on the run, improvisation quarterback who has a solid arm. TJ Finley is more of an in the pocket, huge, powerful right arm type of quarterback. So basically the opposite of a Bo Nix. So I think that creates a bit of a different dynamic. Now, the difference is, of course, Bo has the experience and got that spring under Harsin. So this could be viewed as just a move towards competitiveness, which everybody should understand, or it could be one of these moves where nobody sees it coming and TJ Finley somehow surges to the top of the depth chart, or like you said, Simona, a two-quarterback system. I wouldn't put anything out of the realm of possibility, especially in year one. Year one is sort of the, you know, free year for a coaching staff. Sure, they want to win. Sure, they want to, push towards, a theoretical SEC title. But that's not the expectation right now on the Plains. For Bryan, it's more about building the culture and creating competitiveness. And again, if you do it at the game's most important position, I think it branches out and fills the culture of the team in and of itself. So I think it's a smart move with very low risk.
Wrapping it up here, just a few more minutes with John Garcia. Does a great job for Sports Illustrated. He's their director of football recruiting and been my buddy for a while now. But John, we were talking off the air, and I thought this is an interesting conversation about what we should expect from recruits in the next couple of months. I mean, last year we kind of saw it slow play. They couldn't go on campus. They were committing everywhere without visiting. Obviously, they had to. What do you expect? Recruiting opens up, visits open up here next month. What do you expect to happen? Is it going to be a wild, wild west this summer or what?
I think that's what it is. All in the month of June. We mentioned, 15 months have gone by now since the pandemic shut down any type of in-person recruiting, whether it's simply a coach talking to a prospect or a prospect making a visit or competing during a college camp. So all of those things will start to happen here next week. And again, these are impressionable teenage prospects who are coveted by, and oftentimes Hall of Fame or championship style coaches. And I think that creates an environment for decision making. So I think prospects who are committed to one school could change their mind and end up at another school, or uncommitted prospects can certainly look to make a decision. I think you see a lot of fluidity in the month of June, Ben. I think you take a snapshot of any school's commitment list right now, whether it's the 6 at Alabama, the 3 at Auburn, and sort of throw it away, because in a few weeks, it could look entirely different. And throughout the rest of the summer, I expect almost every school's list to look very, very different, even though there might be less spots available because of the transfer portal and the extra eligibility the college prospects got because of COVID. But still, recruiting is recruiting. These are still teenagers, and these campuses are all still pretty great. So you always expect movement there, and it's just emphasized more because it just hasn't happened for 15 months, which is a very long time as you're establishing yourself as a prospect like these kids have.
John Garcia with Sports Illustrated, the director of football recruiting over there. John, I'm super impressed, man. I'm like, you're like the wizard of recruiting in the country here. I'm so impressed. It's the first time I've gotten an opportunity to speak with you. I know you and Ben are super close, but we appreciate your time so much, man. Can you tell folks how to follow you, how to get a hold of you, just how to know everything that I guess, that you got in there on social media?
Yeah, I appreciate the kind words. Yeah, Twitter at SI All-American. I'm at John Garcia _JR. We cover college football and basketball recruiting. It's all free online, so check us out, siallamerican.com. We got a lot coming this summer, as you might expect.
John, we appreciate it so much. John Garcia, the director of football recruiting over at Sports Illustrated. Ben Thomas, the director of football recruiting here in the state of Alabama for AL.com. Patrick Greenfield behind the scenes there for us. Patrick always does a great job. I'm Simone Eli here with WKRG in Mobile. Guys, we appreciate your time. John, thanks so much for your wisdom, your knowledge, your input. We'll definitely be reaching back out here as official visits ramp up next month and as we move forward closer to fall, man. Thank you so much again.